we're going to have a really fun time here within our session topic, which is all about beyond engagement. So we'll be using Menti throughout the session today. So I will do encourage you to have that queued up. The code is 72246845. We will be getting to that. But engagement, this felt like it was the yardstick for which we're measuring learning solutions from, but maybe I caution to say otherwise. We all know training is a big investment, but how often does it lead to real results? So today, we're going to go beyond engagement to focus on effective learning that truly drives performance. So as mentioned before I introduce myself, would love you to start to fill in the Menti 72246845 and share what is your biggest learning challenge. And as you do that, I'll come to who I am and what we'll be speaking about today. So again, welcome. I'm Danielle Wallace. I'm the founding partner and chief learning strategist at Beyond the Sky Custom Learning, where my team and I have the privilege of working with leading organizations across North America. But my little secret for you is that before I was in learning development, I was a marketer. So I say that, the bit of like hiding here because I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to have made you buy more Doritos, buy more Olay and Old Spice and Swiffer. I in the marketing world, I was able to use these techniques to drive not just engagement, but to drive purchase and behavior change. And that's what I'm delighted to do now that I moved over from the dark side into learning and development, where today I'm going to be sharing with you some of the techniques that go beyond, even a message like in the marketing world, but to actual behavior and skill change in your learners. And let's set the stage for that to ensure that we're overcoming your biggest challenge. So again, we'll be using this Menti. The code's on the screen, and this 72246845 will be shown throughout today's session. It looks like from many of us that some of the challenges that we have within our learning solutions are time constraints. Yes, this continues to be probably the number one driver I see, followed by the difficulty connecting the learning to the performance outcomes. This is key. And as you have further thoughts and ideas about this, feel free to put them into the chat. But I definitely can say we'll be addressing some of these items through our session today. So with that, what is our session today? Today, we'll be looking at how to go beyond engagement to truly drive performance results. To set the stage for that, I'm really curious to know how you got good at your job. Maybe put into the chat, how did you get good at your job? How did you learn what to do so you're effective? Put that into the chat. Natalie's saying experience, and Carol's saying practice. It's practice, which many of us are saying as well. Melissa's speaking about networking, so it's like learning from other people. And Osa's talking about feedback. So again, that combination of practice and feedback. And Tammy is saying you're learning from each other as you're doing this. This is this hands-on practice that Christopher is speaking to. Learning from examples, as Deborah is saying, asking questions to subject matter experts like Alexis is saying, and really learning, as Tamara is saying, through that trial and error of feedback. Yes, this is indeed our modern learning world. The way it used to be, training used to be about experts sharing their knowledge while students passively took notes. The assumption was that you, as a learner, would retain it and you would acquire all the skills. But you just shared that actually most of what you learned was not through formal training. Things have changed, and so have our learners. The workforce now allows us to move beyond engagement, which is table stakes, and to focus on effective performance-driven solutions. So what I'll be sharing with you will help you transform your learning strategies to meet the demands of this fast-paced world. We now need to learn faster, just as you've been doing through your own experiences of practice and learning on the job. This is no longer about just pushing classroom training into some self-paced training or to some other solution. There, and you think about this, I'd love you to add to the chat. What instructional methods, maybe from your school experience or your college experience, that you had from this traditional approach just won't work for your modern work environment? For example, I know my experience, yes, like as Betsy's saying, lecture. From my experience, lecture is not an appropriate, no, it's not an effective way of driving results. Many of us are saying lecture, book study, as Tracy's saying. Yes, this worked great for us in this more traditional setting, the way things used to be when we had experts espousing their knowledge or even sharing, having you read books. This doesn't work for our current age. All of self-study. Um, Death by PowerPoint, as Kevin is saying, yes. These approaches in the past, while they might have worked, or even they could be overcome by having boring lectures with a great presenter. Maybe the presenter's skills are good, and maybe their presenter is able to share nice to know information because they're funny. This just doesn't, unfortunately, work into our environment today where the pace of change is so fast. And you've already mentioned there's limited time. We need to drive results faster. We can no longer afford to spend time on things that just maybe they're engaging, like a good facilitator, which definitely, don't get me wrong, we need that. But it needs to go beyond engagement. We're past due now. What worked in the past to make training effective just is no longer working for our fast-paced environment we have now. And just moving classroom training into shoving it into e-learning and coming through with all the role play, so coming through all the reading long communications pieces that Carol's speaking to, just doesn't quite work. So our solutions today need to be effective the first time. So learners are getting things the first time within our fast-paced world. And we're going to look at 7 ways of actually achieving that so you're able to have actually effective learning. The first 3 I'll be walking you through are all about overall approaches you can take to your learning solution. They're overall holistic approaches. The next 4 I'll be sharing with you are ones you can even use a la carte, depending on what levels of buy-in you get in your organization. Most organizations have limited time and budget. So it's important that we focus on the right areas to drive the best results. So this session isn't just about me sharing knowledge. No, no, no. I'll be helping you pinpoint where you can drive performance, and you yourself will actually be learning by doing. So with that to set the stage, I want to take you through the first of the 7 tips that we have. And this is all about the idea of designing for performance, not just knowledge. Curious, is knowledge useful on its own? Great, my head's filled with knowledge. Maybe it's with all those long communications that we spoke of, that Carol wrote up in the chat. Usually knowledge on its own is not for the sake of knowledge. It's all about how it's applied. So to make learning truly effective, we need to focus on designing for performance, not just sharing information. I'm going to share with you a before example of a course. So this is a typical course that you might see within any learning solution that's provided by subject matter experts. And as we do that, we'll also be using the Menti. And I want you to take particular focus to think about, just for this traditional approach, how able you are to help your team members. In this case, it's the objective, to help your team members have conversations about mental illness and your confidence in doing that. And then I'll ask you the same question for the second approach. So within this, again, first traditional approach, imagine this. Imagine that you're taking a course on mental health. The objectives of the course are to distinguish between forms of mental illness in the workplace. You're a manager, so you need to have informed conversations with your team about mental illness. In this course, you are learn about what mental health is. If I was delivering this in an e-learning or in person, maybe I start by providing a definition. Mental illness is having a significant impairment in these. Then perhaps I'd elaborate and provide context. I might share that it's the biopsychosocial approach, meaning their genetic, biological, environmental, social, and psychological behavioral factors. Then I'd tell you that I'd walk you through each of the five types of mental illness in the workplace. I'd provide some interesting stats, let's say, and then I'd finish off with a quiz. So I'd use this quiz to check your knowledge and to make sure you all pass. So you're all now skilled. So add into the mentee how confident you are to be able to have a conversation with your team members about mental health and how likely you are to have impact and actually like help them. And as you do that, I'll share with you perhaps another approach. So imagine this approach. This is a snippet of the opening of the exact same course for the exact same objective. The objective being to have conversations about mental health with your team. So pay attention to, if there's lecture, which you have mentioned prior as one of the things from a traditional approach that maybe aren't effective nowadays, and pay attention to how people are figuring out how to have effective conversations. And there is audio with this.
Let's begin by considering this scenario.
I'm frustrated. Yaz was late to an important meeting again, and I was left making up excuses for her. She also has had a poor attitude lately. This behavior is completely unacceptable and unprofessional and needs to stop.
What would you do? Select the best response. How many of your employees may be experiencing a decline in mental health? Start by having open conversations and sharing resources to support your employees. In this course, you will reflect on key information and scenarios when supporting your employees' mental health. Work through this workplace scenario to see if you can assist Chen. Meet Chen, a well-respected employee whose performance has suddenly started to deteriorate. Select the approach you would like to take.
Chen, I need to speak with you over Zoom to discuss your performance. Hi, Chen. I wondered if everything is okay and if you'd like to have a casual chat on a Zoom call over coffee.
Select the option you would do next.
Hi, Chen. You don't seem yourself lately, and I wondered if everything is okay. Hi, Chen. I need to talk to you about your recent attitude and declining performance.
I'm fine. I just want to get on with my work.
So if you could.
Thinking about the best way to respond to your employee is important. Some responses are much more effective than others.
So if you could go to the mentee, again, code 72246845, love to see your thoughts on the variations between those two options. In particular, rate your confidence in having a meaningful mental health conversation with your team and its impact on the team. And then while you're using that mentee again at 72246845, would love it if you could add to the chat which method you prefer to have a conversation with your peers about mental health and why. So as you write into the chat about which method you prefer and why, seeing here the traditional approach, so it looks like it's fairly low confidence in having meaningful conversations and therefore low impact to help them. Where the second approach, the think try approach, has higher confidence and more impact to help them. And why did you rate that as you did? I'd love you to put into the chat. What did you like about that second option? When people were thinking, and then they were trying, and then getting feedback. So Robin's like that it's real-time feedback. And I should say this is a snippet. It's a very small snippet of the conversation, so I extracted a bit for the purposes of our presentation today. Chris was talking about examples to practice. So as Cheryl was saying, it made it more real and more of a practical application, as Josh was saying. And Deborah's really coming to the core of this. It presented a scenario. It's a realistic scenario rather than just a definition. Um, and the immediacy of what it is can be helpful. As Laura's saying, you're faced with real potential examples. So it's a safe space to practice, which is a great for what training is. And Tracy's really summing up. It's just more effective. And this is not just more effective, but it's designed for performance outcomes. So beyond just sharing information, this actually drives results. So in the first example, we actually measured the performance change. So in the first more lecture example, people didn't take away the skills and they were the wrong skills anyhow. They're taking away the definitions of mental illness and learning new terminology, which didn't meet the objectives. And a second approach, when we validated that with our testing methods, the learners demonstrated that they were actually able, to start conversations with empathy. And the key outcomes were met, which is to start conversations with empathy and use positive language. So this training approach, I mean, this is what we do here. We're really focused on making sure there's effective learning, otherwise there's no point. And most organizations struggle and many invest in training to share knowledge when ultimately we're trying to drive performance results. As you talked about earlier on, some of the constraints of time, which you mentioned earlier, Menti, and you also mentioned how you learn on the job, being you're learning. These all come together when we can create effective learning solutions that drive performance results. And this comes together with our second tip, which is the idea of apply instead of teaching. So we'll unpack many of the examples actually we shared in that opening mental health example. We'll unpack them throughout these subsequent tips, this being one of them. So imagine, what if learners could make meaningful choices to learn? And we're learning by doing instead of quizzing for remedial testing. So I'm going to be sharing with you as part of a course where people have been learning how to work effectively with their prospects. And in particular, pay attention to how quiz questions are being used.
Remember Lara? Well, you recently ran into her. She asks if you could meet about her business needs. Remember, she owns an organic foods business, is doing well, and wants to expand. Use what you've learned to engage Lara and help her realize her financial goals. To gain her business, you must answer every question correctly. Which will you do before the meeting?
Yeah, exactly. The meetings times they had available didn't work for me. And you know what? When we spoke on the phone, I didn't feel like they were listening to me. They were already suggesting solutions before we've even met. I'm not going to attend the meeting. Yeah, exactly. I have a great feeling about this meeting. We're meeting at 6 p.m., so it doesn't take time from my crazy work day. And we're planning to talk about my business plan and really think through what I need to expand successfully. Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'll let you know what happens.
So a different approach of how
Remember,
quizzes are being used. Love you to put into the chat any thoughts on, in particular, on the use of how quiz questions are being used. And as you do that, I'll expand on that example. That video example didn't have teaching, but instead there was learning by doing. So likewise, this example here is a job aid. It drives performance. So we were asked to create training to take associates from level 2 to level 3 and handle more types of files. but actually training would be quite costly and ineffective, we felt. So instead, we created a rubric that allowed associates to know what skills they needed to move from level 2 to level 3, and their existing coaches could assess them on those skills. So the results were actually phenomenal. There's a significant decrease in the error type as these associates move from level 2 to level 3, and a much quicker learning solution than if we had taught them what was needed in the classroom setting, which was the original ask, and even have that gap between the classroom setting and their time on the job. A coaching rubric actually allowed them to be learning by doing. I'm curious to know for yourselves, what types of learning initiatives do you typically offer and what format are they in? And that helps us think through if you're able to have different learning solutions. Perhaps could you offer a job aid or a checklist to get around teaching people and sharing knowledge? What types of learning initiatives do you typically offer? So onboarding, as Melissa is saying, onboarding is a really good example. Within the breadth of that, there is potentially options for using checklists or having people learn by doing and getting feedback, whether that is through those leading a training or their peer coaches or their onboarding buddies, or whether it's through an e-learning. The learning by doing becomes a really interesting way to be able to have a faster skill acquisition. And Lindsay speaking about the having a knowledge center on the job resources and job aids. Exactly. And we'll pick up on that further. Robin's using the idea of micro learning and asynchronous e-learning and job aids. So again, those are great examples. With those types of initiatives, perhaps too, you have an opportunity to be able to have ways people are learning, not just being taught at, especially with micro learning. Maybe people can actually be learning through the micro learning using quizzes, not to punish, but to think through different options. Um, and oh, you guys have great examples here from the mixed mode onboarding, creating videos with peer-to-peer interaction for customer soft skills. Tracy, that's great. So that's an effective way that people are actually learning by doing. Um, these are, again, Laura speaking to managers, play a key role in this. Watching skills-based e-learning and then sending it to manager to coach the skills and practice. Absolutely. And I'll be sharing actually in my next example, that example, Laura, but at scale. So imagine if we could have Laura's idea where people are, they're playing a key role in their learning. But instead, perhaps what if their manager's not available? Could they learners still get that type of feedback? So in the mental health example, we saw there was feedback, but what if we could go even further than just an e-learning and speak to more of what Lara's speaking about with more personalized feedback? This comes to level 2 on AI in learning and development model that I have, where the first level is using AI to make our jobs faster. But level 2, which I'll speak to now, is about having learners interact with AI to get that feedback, as an example, on scale. And I'm going to share an example. Maybe we'll get somebody to help out here. Casey, are you able to be a participant?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot here.
Thanks for meeting
Imagine
with me.
this.
I know the organization is going through changes, but as a top performer, it's hard not to feel overlooked. We talked about a raise, and since then I've taken on more work. So I've been trusting you'd follow through. I'm hoping you'll keep your word.
Ooh. So imagine your employee comes to you with that, saying, I know we're going through layoffs, but you promised me that you'd give me a raise, so I'm a top performer, so how are you going to keep your word? Ooh, that's a tough conversation. Wow, geez, man, I don't want to. I feel pretty embarrassed practicing that amongst. I feel a bit embarrassed practicing that amongst peers. In the confines of like me one-on-one with e-learning, that's much better. Casey, maybe because we are practicing with a large group, maybe give a really silly answer, and we'll lower the stakes a bit. Give a really silly answer as to if you are this person's boss. What might you say back to him when he's asking for a raise, despite the fact that there's layoffs?
A silly answer.
Yeah, I just trying to lower the pressure because it is a very difficult role play.
He's stupid.
Oh
There's
no, what would you say back to him? What would you say back to him? Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
I don't know what a silly answer would
Oh,
be.
it can be any answer. Oh, deal with it. And maybe use Melissa's. We use Melissa's response.
Right,
Um,
deal with it. That's a very silly answer.
yeah. Um, um, I didn't forget about you. And okay, oh, that's good. I'll combine a bunch of these. Thankful you have a job. Oh, mine. Okay. So what do you really want to say, right? And because this, let's see what he says back. And he's programmed
I
to be
understand
nice.
that the company is going through a challenging
Mm.
time, and I appreciate having a job. However, I believe it's important to discuss my concerns and contributions, especially given the changes to my role and title. I am committed to the success of our team and would like to explore how we can address my career growth and compensation in this new structure.
Ooh, okay. What to continue on from a silly response, what might you say back? I'll copy what Rebecca's saying. Um, this is so what we're continuing on the conversation. And let's see how our personalized 100% at scale feedback
Rating
is.
2. The manager failed to acknowledge and validate the employee's concerns, showing a lack of empathy and active listening. Their responses were dismissive, offering no support for career growth or constructive dialogue.
It's true. But we create this is custom created. Custom created this. It's in articulate storyline, but it doesn't matter. Like it's not built into storyline. It's custom created. We could create it in Captivate or storyline, whatever. What's really interesting in these examples is that they're getting to actually what Laura was speaking about is about we do learn through role plays, and the manager plays an important part. But what if managers don't have time or money? How can we still practice having difficult conversations, as an example, safely, as others spoke about safe practice, and still benefit from the rich feedback at scale where we can use tools now to allow us to do that. And what's fun is that every single time it's a completely different response. I programmed that one to be fairly easy. They can be programmed many different ways depending on what skills are needed. So yeah, I use a particular storyline. Here's another example. I've sped it up. About trying to take time off over the holidays, and you need to respond back to your employee who is having a situation.
Your response could be perceived as indirectly questioning the team member's responsibility or implying that they haven't considered their workload, which might make them feel defensive. Instead, consider a more empathetic and direct approach.
So there's various different ways of being able to provide that feedback at scale to allow people to learn by doing, which is the main theme. Curious to know if you have used, are there any opportunities in your organization to be able to use AI at all? So as you put that into the Menti at 7224-6845, these themes of learning by doing are persistent, whether they are through AI, as we just discussed, whether it's through a coach or a manager providing these feedback as well. The whole theme is to have people learn by doing and to try to really limit the amount of lecture. And you'll see throughout this, the ways quiz questions are being used throughout, like quiz questions, you could call that in the role play example, you're asking and answering questions. We're not doing remedial testing of just knowledge. It's all application based. And Rebecca's saying, so we do a lot of testing on the backside to make sure there's less hallucination risk, and which has dramatically improved each month actually through the various large language models. And so, yes, many of us, as Natalie's saying, aren't allowed to use AI due to security. Which is definitely where most organizations are at. although it seems we have a more progressive group here today, which is awesome. Um, these are the same things that I'd say keep aware of as the landscape unfolds. So you have in future at your arsenal just a wealth of different options to be able to have people to be learning by doing. And many of us are level 1, which is awesome. And yeah, keep this in the back of your head to think about effective ways at driving learning to drive direct performance results. So if we looked at designing for performance and these themes about not just sharing knowledge, and a good way of doing that is by having people apply their thinking, whether it's a more conventional approach or whether it's with AI. You notice that many of the past examples that I've shared when I was talking about learning by doing use stories. And this is important. Storytelling and the next 4 examples I'll be sharing with you are all ways that people can be learning by doing, and they can even be used a la carte. So say you don't have organizational buy-in for your compliance training to have it be more case-driven. Can you instead use this technique then more a la carte? So this is an example of a compliance case study where we used, it's an AI avatar, but we used it to create a story. And importantly, it's not an AI avatar just lecturing, because you've already spoken to the fact that lectures and death by PowerPoint is not that effective. What if instead we could use stories in a way that quickly and easily can convey the point of your message and have people, again, learning by doing? Other ways that can be very effective is podcasts. So in this example, to be used for storytelling via internal podcasts. It's gaining traction in a lot of organizations.
Thanks for joining us for a day in the life.
Other examples of sharing stories can even be by your learners sharing their stories, their success stories, again, to help depict how it's relevant to them. We've even done storytelling to drive relevance and application in different formats. Again, whether it's a comic or whether it's a video, it's a podcast, or it's an AI avatar, there's many ways of using this idea of storytelling. I'm curious to know where you're using storytelling. We can put that in through the Menti, and I'll share another example. So if you add to the Menti 72246845, if you're using storytelling, or maybe you want to use it more, or maybe you're actually using it quite a bit. Storytelling can be effective. One common way of using it is with videos. And whether it's AI avatar video like I shared, or whether it's other different types of video formats, it's a way to help dramatize your learning point and to help bring whatever you want to convey in a way that people can then answer questions to in a way that's relevant to them. So twine scenarios, as Natalie's saying, is using that. And overall, a lot of us are using storytelling occasionally, such as adding a scenario to reinforce a quiz point. I would encourage all of you to try to use this technique a la carte to be able to definitely use it within, quiz questions. But can you think of it potentially as a way to drive the essence of your learning? Is there a way that you could use it to bookend your learning experience? For example, we literally created a course in 5 days just from raw content due to a compressed timeline. And we added a story to bookend the beginning and the opening closing story, even within that tight constraint. So people understood from the start why it was relevant to them. Why should they care? And it provided the closure at the end. So it's a way to even go beyond just having it in quiz questions to further drive relevance. Yes. So besides storytelling, another technique to use in almost any training is look at ways to support performance instead of just teach. So you spoke earlier about the use of job aids. Thank you for that. Often a course isn't even the solution itself. Often job aids or manuals and process guides become more relevant, or even in context help for digital adoption platforms. And I'm seeing through the past chats, Lindsay, you were speaking about using a knowledge center. So this is great. That people are actually able to get what they need when they need it, um, to access their key resources to get their role done. Again, the goal isn't training for information. The goal is that people can do their roles. And that's where job aids become really useful, whether it's to replace a course, whether it is to supplement a course afterwards. I'm curious to know if there's situations where you could use job aids or resource guides instead of traditional teaching. Is there ways, and even Robin mentioned earlier about using microlearning, asynchronous learning job aids. Is there ways that you are using job aids or could use them further? Tracy speaking about technical support knowledge articles. Yeah, a fabulous example. I've seen a lot of systems training as an example. Wow, where people are being taught the system, where in real life and in our real lives, in our modern fast-paced world, we would actually just do better by having the knowledge support articles we need right there in our second screen, hopefully it's two screens, and just doing it versus being taught how to do something on a system without the hands-on practice. It's the learning by doing that becomes really key. Um, uh, the exception can be sometimes doing is those compliance requirements. For that, actually, we have even used job aids for compliance requirements. In this example here, where there's a infographic, we've actually put some of the ancillary information into an infographic to ensure everything was being covered. So we could focus the rest of the course on really driving performance. Learners do love cheat sheets, as Carly's saying, yeah, are a tool to use. And Carol also speaking about the need for the use of infographics. These are great tools that can replace a course, supplement a course, and most importantly, provide a better means for people to be able to learn by doing and more closely mimic real life. So I commend you on those. So besides storytelling and performance support, another technique to use in almost any training a la carte is the opportunity to reflect. It's often overlooked to have this honest type of reflection. I've actually been purposefully doing this throughout our session today, whether it's the mental health example where I asked you to reflect, or even all these other use cases of your own I've asked you to reflect upon. I encourage you to think about how you can incorporate reflection in any learning solution. So this example actually incorporates it within an e-learning where typically reflection's missed. So we actually built it in to have people take away and think about what they're learning and how they're directly going to be applying it on their role. This is an Arise course. And then they're able to actually save that PDF so they could use that as an action plan for their further use. So I'm going to get you to take a few moments to reflect upon where you or your team's impact is on these 6 techniques so far. So again, in the Menti, it code 7224-6845, reflect upon and answer the questions that are there. I'll give you some quiet moments to do that. It is in the Menti, and I'll put an expanded version here on the screen. And then while you're doing your quiet reflection, I'll answer some of the questions that are coming through here. So some of the questions I'm getting are about the examples themselves. So that was a custom block, Lindsay, that we put into Storyline, so custom program within JavaScript to enable people to type in the response and then get a PDF afterward of it. You could also trigger it to email it to you. And then likewise, the other example where I embedded a large language model into Storyline, it's with custom programming, so custom JavaScript with APIs. So all this is in the pursuit of people learning by doing and trying to minimize the amount of lecture. So again, continue to reflect upon where your impact is. I'm seeing a lot of thoughtful reflection and a lot of similarities, actually. Whether there's opportunity to apply, to focus on skills versus knowledge, our first tip, using quiz questions for learning by doing rather than assessing knowledge, providing personal feedback, using storytelling, job aids to support continued improvement, and having time for reflection. Note down which one provides the biggest opportunity for you. That when implemented would really save you more time, money, stress, because these end up becoming your own action plan. I'm going to leave that Menti open. Again, I do encourage you to list where your own opportunities are, because reflection is most commonly missed within any learning solution. Typically, it's cut. Typically, debriefs are cut as well. That's where people learn through getting rich feedback. But this becomes the means for how you could actually incorporate what you're learning today, to drive meaningful impact. So leave that open, and do take the opportunity to reflect. So that said, with our 6 tips so far, sometimes you need to engage. So when you do need to engage, do strive to be unique and performance-based. And with this example, as I share, accessible. So this is an example where we were creating this is a publicly available course, where we're creating a multi-language, fully accessible course to reach a range of different learners that needed to acquire this critical basic skills. And importantly, it is showcasing some of the prior examples, which I shared about the focusing on the application base through different scenarios and trying to really eliminate lecture. And doing so in a way, though, that when you need to engage to ensure that it's accessible, that people can actually fully experience your course, meeting WCAG guidelines, or in this case, also meeting multi-language guidelines. So I'm really curious to know what's one of the things that are resonating with you most in terms of what we've covered so far? I'm seeing great reflection here. I love it. I'm going to move this on to the next, though. If you could pin your focus area in terms of the items we've spoken about so far, where do you want to drive your attention to? Is your own transfer from the session going to be on having more design for performance, not knowledge? Are you going to be striving to have people apply more instead of just teaching? Are you going to look at ways to have personalized feedback, whether that's through e-learning, whether that's through a classroom or other technology-enabled means? Or perhaps, and again, you could use the pinpoint on the Menti. Perhaps you could use storytelling. It could be used a la carte, cost nothing, weave it in, maybe bookend a course. Or maybe it's rethinking performance support. Or opportunities to reflect, as Tracy is saying. How can we weave the reflection so our learners can actually have the space and time to take away the materials, like take away the whole performance outcome, that's the point. Or when we do need to engage, maybe being mindful of engaging for the learning experience. So Eric also saying about designing for performance, not just knowledge, and using storytelling. That's one of the key things. And I'd love for others to continue to add on to the Menti, and then we'll be expanding upon that in the chat shortly. It looks like in general, we have as more of a practical takeaway en masse is this idea of being able to apply, not just teach. If we can collectively make that as an impact within the learning solutions under our scope, we will make an enormous difference in having people acquire skills faster in a way that reflects our modern workforce and a way that reflects and respects what they already know. So I'd love you to add to the further expand upon that into the chat. What's one thing you want to remember then a year from now based on this? So when I see you at the next event, or when I see you on another ELB amazing webinar, I'll ask you, how is it going, Betsy, to be able to apply, not just teach the information. Would love you to put into the chat. And again, this is actually deliberate because your practical reflection on your unique application is actually what's driving retention for this. So add to the chat what you want people to be doing. Maybe it's supporting performance. So that mind shift change to support performance, which does come with educating, working with subject matter experts to be performance driven. Get it? But unless it's saying it's about performance, not knowledge. It's about and really, the importance of applying that concept. Maribel speaking about supporting learning. That's what and Maribel, that's kind of what our roles are. And yet, you think you've hit it because we forget that when we give them the day-to-day and there's content driven, we're subjected to this more of a content-driven approach when ultimately we're not about driving content. We're driving whatever the performance outcome is that content meets. Oh, Melissa, I'm glad that you're getting some good takeaway from this. And Michelle, using storytelling to hook the learners, to help them relate and reflect, these become really key to their learning transfer and being able to drive that performance on the role. I love the idea of using job aids more. So again, a lower cost solution and to have focus on that design on it. I love this. So as Carol speaks about bringing it on, so much to learn. On that note, there is some free resources to help you keep learning about this topic. There is an infographic summary and checklist at the first QR code that's listed there that allows you to be able to get the quick takeaway, the job aid and practical application checklist, the checklist, which we spoke about. So you can apply these to your work. And then secondly, I'm diving deeper into this area with a free webinar on May 8th about 5 costly training mistakes and then how to fix them. So we'd love to see you there. I'm gonna put these into the chat. And oh, whoa, that was look at that. Be thankful you have a job. That was, my Mendy's not working. That was the quiz question when I asked for feedback. I will put into the chat, once I get the correct link, the session on May 8th, as well as infographic summary. And then I'll re-loop back to your key takeaways. So last I want to say in terms of this, collectively, I'm seeing throughout your feedback, we overall have a need and opportunity to support application, as Donna is saying. I think that sums it up. So I'll close with that. I'll close with what Donna is saying. Our role within learning development as professionals is to support application, this transfer of knowledge on the job. All right, it isn't just about sharing knowledge, it's about the performance outcomes. And there's techniques we can use, specifically these 7 that we can use to support that. I want to thank everybody for your fantastic participation and engagement. I've really enjoyed this. I'm going to be closing out the session and then staying on to answer any questions. So I want to give everybody a big thank you for your time and the fabulous engagement. And keep on learning. Keep applying this to your own solutions to drive fabulous, fabulous results. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Danielle. We do have a few questions that popped in the Q&A section throughout the course of your presentation. So if we don't mind going back a bit,
Yes.
And I fear I'm going to mispronounce this name, but it's Mizanur asked, do you consider that AI is negatively affecting the mental health of the majority of the workforces?
Great question. I'm not a mental health expert, but I do know we work with a number of organizations who they themselves are experts and they're creating a lot of learning in the space. I do know that they are weighing, there's definitely positives and there's definitely negatives on that. So they're carefully weighing those and making considerations while they consider who their audience is, like whether they're workers, whether they're students, whether like who their audience is, and then how they're using AI. So that I know there's like a lot of active work done in that space.
Awesome. Another question we got from Cheryl. She asked, how do you use this idea with topics that are about knowledge and not application? For instance,
Yeah.
the company's terminology for a clerk or customer service person.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So terminology. So terminology is to enable something. People don't use terminology just for the sake of terminology. And I'm going to set aside compliance courses, which I'll speak to. So from a terminology standpoint, people need to say I'm a customer service representative, and there is terminology I need to use to do my job. Um, some quicker ways of enabling that is two that come to mind. One is you still could do a scenario where people are using this terminology in context because terms are used not just on their own, they're actually used for a reason. One would be that. And then secondly, if you have to have people just learn terms for the sake of terms, definitely some faster ways of doing that is flashcards or the electronic version of flashcards. It's not about it's or using quizzing, but quizzing to learn. So I would, if I had to create e-learning on that and I couldn't do flashcards or electronic flashcards, I would have intentionally create a safe space, a safe scenario or a game that will allow people to just to try to memorize these terms. And through the trying and failing of it, they will learn it a lot faster. It's a great question.
Yeah,
So
and we
they're learning by doing, basically.
I'm sorry, yeah. So we had another question about AI. Going back to that, Rebecca asked, what is the risk that the AI gives a hallucinated answer?
Yeah, so that actually has come a long, long, long way. Like every month there's significant improvements. And we've been even working on our example for the past 3 years, and there's significant improvements and a significant decrease in hallucination. That's done by the large language models overall, so that's good. And then there's definitely work that we do on our back end that every other vendors do on their back end to reduce that. So you can actually program that in through your different parameters. So very important point. And then the third thing I'll add to that is we have disclaimers as well to ensure that these are luckily used for training purposes, so it decreases the risk. We're not actually talking to customers directly, but there is disclaimers that you are to use your judgment and realize it is AI.
Okay, well, actually, two more quick questions. Carol said she would love to hear your ideas for those of us who don't have articulate storyline, etc. She said she's always looking for creative ways to deliver learning with very limited resources.
Oh yeah. So even even the point of the activities I'm sharing is they're tool agnostic. So you could still achieve the same outcome, again, thinking on the fly, even if you had a PDF with, even if you had a PDF, okay? So I could design a course, even with a PDF, that had a story in it. And with PDFs, you can have hyperlinks to have people select which option they want in the story and it moves to a different point of the PDF so they can see if they're right or not and get feedback based on that choice. Um, or you could have that same thinking in a classroom course, in a virtual session. The opportunities to weave in stories are free. The opportunities to have people try, like to try to get feedback in turn, however that is. Like it's the learning by doing that drives it's the learning by doing that drives the learning outcome. It's not about, which tool it's in per se. The tools can enable that. Or whether it's even using some of the more cost-effective or the free plan versions of the online tools such as Kahoot or Menti or such. That's a great question. And I don't think the budget itself is the limiting factor that says, no, you can't do any of this.
That's awesome. Okay, one more quick question. Catherine asked, she said, you shared an example of a course that was created for Credit Canada that was public facing. Would you be able to
Yes.
provide that link to the course?
Do that. I can see if I can do that now. While I entertain any other questions. Let me grab the link.
We got one more
Great.
question that just got dropped into the Q&A. They said, I would like to hear more about compliance.
Yeah, that's a good one. So compliance, so I'm trying to multitask here. I'll get my other example. Give me 1 second to find credit card. Okay, got credit card. So compliance is a bit tricky. So I won't argue. Compliance is a bit trickier. The challenge with compliance is often the solution is actually just to share knowledge. Like there isn't. I'm thinking of some compliance courses we're doing now. People already know how to do it. They're already doing it. So there is actually no performance change needed. There's no knowledge change that's needed. I'm like, wow, this is just really to track. So that's where this is not, it's not a performance-driven outcome. Then there's other compliance courses where people actually need to change their behavior. So they actually have to, follow, they have to raise the flags to ensure that money is not being laundered. They have to, notify the right processes and channels. In that case, that's where storytelling can become really rich, and having people, especially at the start of a course, where we add in what the risks are. Thinking we do a lot of compliance courses. At the beginning of the beginning will have a story as to say what the risks are, saying it's electronic communication. You can't be emailing things, as an example. We'll touch upon that story throughout, while still keeping all the stakeholders happy with the compliance information that's needed. And then as we refer to that story, then we'll also bookend with that story, so there's closure. And because it's a story-driven approach, people understand, oh, this is important. That's why it's important. There's consequences. Okay. And what would I do in that situation? Would I just send them the text of the information because it's quick? Or would I take the time to compose an email through the correct channels to avoid triggering any compliance issues and risks? Okay, it allows people to think through what they would do and drives the actual performance. It's a great, great, great question.
So the second part to that question, she said, many of our regulatory drivers only require level 1 awareness for training, and this seems to really be driving toward level 3 performance training. How do you justify the extra development costs to management when only level 1 is required?
Yeah, it comes to what the goal is. So in the very first example I shared, where people are actually doing it already, there's no there's no need to have performance change because people are doing it already. Then you wouldn't, because there's no need. There's no change of performance that's needed. You would justify it by saying, if you wanted the actual skill change, if you actually wanted people, in this case, for the communication and not sharing what you're not supposed to electronically, the organization really wanted that. It wasn't just lip service. They actually, people cannot, it's super important. They actually have to follow procedures. So we use the extra time, and it wasn't that much extra time to add in a story, and write it in plain language. But the differences of that versus the bare basics of having their policy and, an attestation at the end, but a policy nobody understands. I mean, that leads to definitely a significant difference in performance. So that's how we're able to justify that. But overall, some of these a la carte, the a la carte solutions, are much easier to be able to implement and much more cost effective.
Awesome. I think that wraps up the questions that we have. And if you were still pouring in, just information about how to reach you on LinkedIn and things like that. And we're going to give that information to everyone, if you don't mind, Danielle. When
Please.
send the recording, which that was another question that came in. We're going to send the recording of this webinar next week. So you'll have this to reference, and we'll throw in Danielle's LinkedIn so you can follow her and everything, so you can see, keep up with what she's doing. So we are so thankful to Danielle, first of all, for this wonderful, very information-packed session, and we're appreciative to everyone for all the engagement. You guys are amazing. And look for that email next week with a link to the recording so you can review this a bit later. Thank you,
Amazing.
guys.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your great participation. Thank you.